In every war, legends are born, not only from men but from machines. For soldiers of the Second World War, two names came to define the armor that rumbled across Europe: the German Tiger tank and the American M4 Sherman. Both feared, both famous. Yet their reputations have lived on in myth more than in truth. The Tiger's story begins in 1942, when the Wehrmacht's early advantage was fading. German Panzer III and Fokker tanks, once unstoppable, were being outmatched by Soviet T-34s on the Eastern Front. In response, Adolf Hitler demanded a super tank, one that would restore Germany's armored supremacy. The result was the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger Aus for E, weighing over 57 tons, armored with up to 120 millimeters of steel, and armed with the 88mm KWK-36 gun. It was an engineering marvel, at least on paper. Each Tiger cost as much as 5 Shermans and required months to build, its handcrafted parts assembled by specialized crews. It was more than a weapon. It was a statement, Germany's belief that technology and craftsmanship could outthink mass production. But with that brilliance came burden. The Tiger was slow, mechanically fragile, and fuel-hungry. A broken gearbox could sideline it for weeks. In mud or snow, its heavy frame often trapped itself. Even before meeting the enemy, the Tiger was already fighting its own complexity. Across the Atlantic, American engineers faced a different challenge. They didn't need a monster. They needed a machine that could be built fast, shipped anywhere, and kept running by young soldiers far from home. Thus was born the M4 Sherman. Rolling off assembly lines in 1942, it was the embodiment of practicality. Tons in weight 75 mm gun armor between 51 and 76 m, reliable Continental, radial engine that ran on regular gasoline. What the Sherman lacked in armor or firepower, it compensated for in numbers and mobility. By the end of the war, over 49,000 Shermans had been produced, more than any other Allied tank. Factories in Detroit and Chicago could turn out dozens per day. If one was lost, another could be at the front within weeks. The Sherman wasn't designed to duel the Tiger head-on. It was designed to win the war through logistics. Where Germany built one masterpiece, America built an army of machines. The contrast between the two tanks reveals the contrast between two nations' strategies. Germany believed in tactical superiority, that a few elite machines, commanded by the best crews, could overwhelm larger forces. The United States believed in strategic superiority, that overwhelming production, supply lines, and combined arms would grind the enemy down. Both philosophies would meet on the battlefields of North Africa, Normandy, and the Eastern Front, and in those clashes, the myth of invincibility would be tested. When we first heard of the Tiger, we thought it was unstoppable. The sound of its gun could shake your chest. But we also knew we outnumbered them 20-1. Our Tigers were kings until they broke down. Then we were just targets waiting for the enemy to find us. The truth of the Tiger and the Sherman was not written only in steel, but in the men who drove them, fought in them, and died beside them. Camera pans over rusted tank hulks half buried in European fields. By late 1943, these two machines had become symbols of their armies. The Tiger, feared by reputation but rare and resource-intensive. The Sherman, mocked for its thin armor, yet unstoppable in its sheer presence. Soon they would meet, in Tunisia, in Normandy, and beyond, and their legends would be forged in fire. In the next chapter, we'll go beyond the myth, into the numbers, the mechanics, and the battlefield truths. Because in war, reputation is one thing, survival is another. Soft whir of a projector. A deep male voice begins over black and white footage of tank barrels firing in slow motion. When men speak of tanks, they speak first of firepower. The question that echoed through every battlefield briefing was simple. Could the Sherman kill a Tiger before the Tiger killed the Sherman? The Tiger I carried the legendary 8.8 centimeter KWK-36L56 cannon, an evolution of the feared German 88 anti-aircraft gun. Its shells could punch through 110 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters, and at closer range, even the heaviest Allied armor offered little protection. A single well-aimed shot could tear through a Sherman from front to rear, igniting its ammunition in a flash of fire. To Allied crews, that roar became a nightmare. The 88 was the sound of death itself. German gunners were trained marksmen. Their optics, crafted by Zeiss and Leitz, were unparalleled, allowing precise range-finding even through dust or smoke. But precision came at a cost. The Tiger's slow traverse and cumbersome reload meant that in close-quarters fights, its advantage could vanish within seconds. By comparison, the M4 Sherman's 75mm M3 gun looked modest. Effective range, about 500 to 700 meters against frontal armor. But the Sherman's secret weapon wasn't raw power. It was adaptability. As the war evolved, so did the Sherman M4A1 and A3 models received improved high-velocity guns. The British Firefly variant, armed with the 17-pounder cannon, could penetrate a Tiger's armor at over 1,000 meters. We used to call the Firefly our equalizer. You saw a Tiger, you didn't run. You found a flank and took your shot. The Allies learned quickly that no tank survived a frontal duel with the Tiger. Instead, they relied on numbers, maneuver, and coordination, using infantry, artillery, and air support to box the Tiger in. If firepower was the sword, armor was the shield. The Tiger's frontal armor, 100 millimeters thick and angled only slightly, was virtually impenetrable to early Allied guns. Its sides and rear, however, told another story. Thinner plates of 60-80 millimeters could be pierced by a Sherman's shot at close range. Meanwhile, the Sherman's frontal armor averaged 63 millimeters, sloped at 47 degrees. This sloping, a design lesson borrowed from the Soviet T-34, effectively increased its resistance to incoming rounds. On paper, the Tiger was superior. On the battlefield, geometry often decided who lived and who died. A Tiger weighed more than twice a Sherman, nearly 60 tons to the Sherman's 30. That weight demanded constant maintenance, devouring fuel and wearing out engines. Its Maybach HL-230 engine drank 500 liters per 100 kilometers, an impossible appetite in the fuel-starved German army of 1944. In contrast, the Sherman's Continental Radial engine, or Ford V8, could be repaired in the field, its parts interchangeable across thousands of units. It could cross bridges that the Tiger broke beneath its treads. And most importantly, it kept moving. If a Sherman broke down, we fixed it by morning. If a Tiger broke down, we left it behind. Mobility became survival. The Tiger might dominate a hilltop, but the Sherman could outflank, outsupply, and outlast. A Tiger carried a crew of 5, commander, gunner, loader, driver, and radio operator. Highly trained, often veterans of earlier campaigns, these men knew every bolt and rattle of their machine. Sherman crews, by contrast, were often young draftees trained in weeks, not months, but their courage was never in doubt. The Tiger was an instrument for experts. The Sherman was a tool for an army. One Tiger could destroy several Shermans, but when surrounded, even the best crew could not fight off a swarm. By late 1944, Germany had produced around 1,350 Tigers of all variants. The United States alone had built over 49,000 Shermans. That ratio, nearly 36 to 1, defined the war's outcome. A Tiger might claim 10 kills before falling, but 10 destroyed Shermans could be replaced within weeks. A single lost Tiger could not. In the end, industrial strength proved more powerful than armor thickness. Wars are not won by perfection. They are won by persistence. But numbers and armor tell only half the story, because a tank is not just a weapon, it is a strategy on treads. In the next part, we move from blueprints to battlefields, to the places where Tigers and Shermans met face to face, and where the truth behind their legends was written in fire and smoke. The battlefield is where numbers become men, and machines become memories. It is one thing to measure armor and firepower on paper, It is another to see how they perform under smoke, confusion, and fear. The first meeting of the Tiger and the Sherman came not in Europe, but in the deserts of North Africa. The German Africa Corps had been pushed west by Allied advances, and the British Eighth Army faced an enemy armed with new and unfamiliar tanks. In January 1943, the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion deployed its first Tigers near Tunis. Allied crews reported shells bouncing harmlessly off German armor. It was the Tigers' debut, and it left an impression that would echo for years. We'd hit them again and again, and they just kept coming. One round from their gun would light up a Sherman like a match. The British, and later the Americans, quickly realized that their current 75mm guns could not compete head-on, but the desert had its own rules. The Tiger's massive frame often bogged down in soft sand. Its engines overheated. When immobilized, the invincible Tiger became a sitting target for artillery and airstrikes. Archival sound, low-flying Spitfires dive, bombs fall. A Tiger burns in the distance. Even in its triumphs, the Tiger showed its weakness. It was a lion that could not run. By June 1944, the Sherman was everywhere, rolling off landing craft, thundering down Normandy's narrow roads. The Tiger, too, had arrived. Elite SS Panzer units fielded the fearsome Tiger I and the newer Tiger II, or King Tiger. The Shermans advanced in waves, hundreds at a time, often without realizing what lay ahead. And waiting in the shadows were the Tigers. You could tell when a Tiger was near. The ground shook. Then that first shell hit, and the tank beside you just disappeared. Tigers could destroy Shermans before the Americans ever saw them. Their 88mm guns fired from over a kilometer away, tearing through armor like paper. But the Americans learned. They used mobility, teamwork, and courage to outmaneuver the Tigers. One Sherman would draw fire while others flanked from the sides or rear. Infantry with bazookas and air support from P-47 Thunderbolts became the great equalizers. The legend of the Tiger was sealed in June 1944 in a small French town called Villers-Bocage. There, a single Tiger commanded by SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann ambushed a British column of Shermans and Cromwells. In minutes, Wittmann destroyed more than a dozen tanks and vehicles, halting the British advance. His name became synonymous with the Tiger's ferocity. The propaganda machine called it invincible. But even legends have limits. Weeks later, Wittmann's Tiger was spotted by Allied aircraft near Sintho. A Canadian Sherman Firefly fired from nearly a kilometer away. One shell struck, detonating the ammunition. The invincible machine was gone in seconds. As the war pushed inland through France and Belgium, the Sherman began to reclaim its dignity. By winter 1944, the Battle of the Bulge tested both tanks under extreme conditions. The Tigers, though powerful, struggled with logistics. They required specialized recovery vehicles, precise fuel mixtures, and constant maintenance. The Shermans, by contrast, could drive hundreds of miles with little more than a wrench and spare parts scavenged from another wreck. We had no luxuries. We patched our armor with sandbags and welded on spare tracks. But the damn things just kept running. At Bastogne, surrounded and outnumbered, the Shermans proved their worth not by killing Tigers, but by enduring the cold, the shelling, and the endless days of defense. While the Shermans fought in the west, the Tiger faced a different enemy to the east, the Soviet T-34 and IS-2. Here, the Tiger's legend was born, and began to die. The open plains of Russia suited its long-range gun, but Soviet tactics favored quantity and sacrifice. For every Tiger destroyed, dozens of T-34s were lost, but more arrived day after day. Archival map, Eastern Front movements, animation of Tiger units shrinking over time. By 1945, the German heavy tank battalions were shadows of their former selves, out of fuel, out of men, and surrounded. Even the strongest armor could not stop the tide of an entire continent. By the war's end, both the Tiger and Sherman had left indelible marks. The Tiger had become the weapon of fear, the monster of the battlefield. The Sherman, the weapon of endurance. the machine that never stopped rolling forward. Each had strengths. Each had flaws. But when the smoke cleared, it was not the Tiger that stood victorious. It was the tank that could be repaired, refueled, and driven again by another crew before the sun went down. In the end, the Tiger's story was one of brilliance undone by excess. The Sherman's story was one of imperfection, redeemed by reliability. Together, they shaped the truth of modern warfare, that no weapon, however mighty, can stand alone against time, teamwork, and endurance. The true difference between the Tiger and the Sherman was never only about armor or guns. It was about how they were used, how strategy, terrain, and human decisions shaped their fate. In the heat of battle, the Tiger was a fortress, a rolling citadel of steel and precision. But a fortress is only as strong as the ground beneath it. The Tiger demanded open fields, clear lines of fire, and a steady supply line behind it. In the broken landscapes of France and Italy, those perfect conditions rarely existed. The Sherman, lighter and more agile, moved where the Tiger dared not tread. Its crews learned to weave through narrow lanes, to hug the sides of hedgerows, to advance not with brute strength but with coordination. In the chaos of Normandy's bocage, the Sherman's smaller frame became an advantage. It could turn faster, hide better, and ambush from unexpected places. Veterans recalled the sound of the Tiger's engine long before they saw it, a deep metallic growl that made the earth tremble. But that sound also betrayed it. Allied tankers could hear a Tiger long before it reached firing range. They would set up ambushes, calling in air support or waiting for the Tiger to expose its flanks. Once it did, the outcome was swift. German commanders often complained that their prized machines were too few and too precious. A single Tiger was worth more than an entire company of Shermans, but one mechanical failure, one fuel shortage, and it became nothing but a stranded monument to over-engineering. The Allies understood this and exploited it. They didn't need to destroy every Tiger. They only needed to stop it from moving. In the vast, muddy fields of Eastern Europe, Soviet forces faced Tigers daily. The Russians rarely engaged head-on. Instead, they used mass and mobility. Dozens of T-34s would spread out and circle, forcing the slower Tiger to turn, pivot, and expose its weak sides. A single hit to a track could cripple it, leaving the crew trapped inside as artillery or infantry closed in. The Allies studied those tactics. They learned that the Tiger's greatest weapon, its fear, could also be its downfall. Crews who kept their nerves, who fought smart instead of scared, often lived to tell the tale. By 1944, Allied commanders had developed an art of fighting tanks with everything but tanks. A Tiger might dominate an open field, but in the air above it, a different predator circled. P-47, Thunderbolts, and Typhoon fighter bombers patrolled the skies, each armed with rockets designed to crack heavy armor. Pilots learned to spot the distinctive cross-shaped tracks of German tanks, to follow the trail of exhaust smoke curling up through the trees. A single rocket hit was enough to turn a 57-ton masterpiece into a burning wreck. German soldiers began to dread the hum of aircraft engines. Even the mightiest Tiger could do nothing against the sky. On the ground, coordination became the Sherman's greatest strength. One tank did not fight alone. Platoons moved in pairs, in formations, each watching the other's flank. When a Tiger appeared, one Sherman drew fire while the others closed in. It was dangerous, desperate work, but it worked. An American gunner later said, "You didn't beat the Tiger with one tank. You beat it with teamwork. We never fought to be heroes. We fought to stay alive." The Germans, by contrast, relied on individual skill. Their aces were legends. Names like Wittmann, Barkmann, Carius, men who destroyed dozens of enemy tanks in single engagements. But even legends cannot fight exhaustion, shortages, and an endless tide of opposition. For every German ace, there were 100 young Allied tankers learning, adapting, improving, and that was the quiet truth of the war. Evolution. Each month, the Allies got faster, smarter, more efficient. The Shermans that rolled into Normandy were not the same as those that left Africa. Their guns were stronger, their armor reinforced, their crews more experienced. The Tiger, by contrast, remained almost unchanged, its brilliance frozen in time, its design trapped by the very pride that created it. The terrain itself turned against Germany. Bridges collapsed under the Tiger's weight. Narrow streets of bombed-out towns trapped them. In Italy, their engines strained on mountain roads. In Russia, they froze in the snow. The Sherman, though less glamorous, crossed rivers, climbed hills, and kept rolling. Its true weapon was not steel, it was momentum. Logistics became destiny. The United States could ship tanks faster than Germany could repair them. When a Sherman was lost, another took its place within days. When a Tiger was destroyed, it took months to replace, and often there were no spare parts, no fuel, no time. By late 1944, the Tiger's roar had faded. Its numbers dwindled, its crews grew weary, and in its place the steady rumble of Allied engines filled the fields of Europe, thousands of Shermans advancing not with power, but with persistence. The myth of the invincible tank began to crumble. Soldiers on both sides saw it. The Tiger's armor could stop shells, but not the tide of war. Even its own builders knew it. Engineers once called it the sword of victory. By 1945, they called it the burden of defeat. Low orchestral hum swells beneath the voice. Grainy footage of Shermans rolling through ruined German towns fades in. War had proven a lesson as old as conflict itself, that no weapon, no matter how perfect, can exist without the will and means to sustain it. The Tiger was a triumph of engineering, but the Sherman was a triumph of practicality. One was a masterpiece, the other a workhorse. And in the fields of Europe it was the workhorse that carried victory on its back. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, Europe was a graveyard of steel. Hundreds of tanks, Shermans, Panthers, Tigers, lay scattered across fields and forests, silent witnesses to the cost of human ambition. The smoke cleared, and what remained was not glory, but truth. The Tiger tank, for all its power, stood like a relic of another age. It had been built to terrify, to dominate, to show the world the precision and might of German engineering. And it had done all those things. But it had also shown the limits of perfection. Too complex, too heavy, too few. It demanded a level of maintenance, fuel, and training that the dying Reich could no longer provide. The Tiger was not defeated by the Sherman alone. It was defeated by the very war it was built for. The Sherman, meanwhile, rolled on. Across Europe, in North Africa, in the Pacific, it became the face of Allied armor. Soldiers called it Tommy Cooker, Ronson, Zippo, nicknames that mocked its vulnerability. Yet the men who drove it knew another truth. The Sherman was the tank that was there, the one that showed up, that moved, that fought. It was the machine that could be repaired overnight, fueled in minutes, and manned by boys who had never seen war until the moment they stepped inside. In every battle, the Sherman gave them a chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance to live, to fight back, to move one more mile toward victory. Veterans would later say that you didn't love the Sherman, but you trusted it. It was like an old truck that never let you down. It rattled, it burned, it broke, but it also came through when it mattered most. The Tiger inspired awe. The Sherman inspired endurance. And when the two met, history proved which mattered more. The story didn't end in 1945. In the years that followed, both tanks became symbols, one of legend, the other of legacy. The Tiger's image lived on in books, films, and documentaries, often as the unbeatable beast, the monster of the battlefield. Even today, only a handful survive, preserved in museums. Massive, silent, intimidating. Standing beside one, you feel its weight not just in metal, but in myth. The Sherman, on the other hand, became the tank of democracy. It served in dozens of nations long after the war ended. It rolled through Korea, the Middle East, and beyond. Its design was copied, improved, adapted. It was not beautiful, not elegant, but it worked. It became the blueprint for the next generation of armored warfare. Historians still debate their comparison. On paper, the Tiger wins every metric. Thicker armor, greater range, more firepower. But wars are not fought on paper. Wars are fought by men in mud and fear, under skies filled with smoke. And in those conditions, reliability, mobility, and numbers matter far more than perfection. For every Tiger that broke down on a frozen road, there were 50 Shermans rolling forward. For every hour a Tiger spent under repair, a dozen Shermans crossed another bridge, another hill, another border. The Tiger may have been the king of the battlefield, but the Sherman was the army of victory. A German officer once said after the war, "Give me a Tiger and I can win a battle. Give me 100 Shermans and I can win a war." And that was the truth. Simple, brutal, undeniable. As years passed, the myth hardened. Model kits, war films, and games turned the Tiger into a monster, the Sherman into cannon fodder. But those who lived it, who smelled the oil and cordite, remembered differently. They remembered the sweat of keeping an engine alive, the teamwork of the crew, the quiet moments between fights when they wondered if their tank would hold another day. The real truth wasn't about which was stronger. It was about survival, about the men inside the steel. In the final months of the war, as Allied tanks rolled into Berlin, one captured German mechanic was asked what he thought of the Sherman. He smiled faintly and said, "It's ugly, but it works. We never had one that just worked." The Tiger was a masterpiece of design. The Sherman was a masterpiece of production. One represented the ambition of a few, the other, the determination of millions. Today, when visitors stand before those rusting giants in museums, they see more than machines. They see two visions of war: precision versus persistence, pride versus practicality. And they see the truth that shaped the modern world. Technology may win battles, but willpower and endurance win wars. Soft piano begins to play. Faint images of crews leaning from hatches, waving flags and cheering as columns roll past destroyed cities. In the end, the Tiger was remembered for its roar, the Sherman for its march. The Tiger burned bright and brief. The Sherman burned steady and long. Both changed history. But only one helped end it. Music swells, a final orchestral rise. The sound of a tank engine fades, replaced by silence. Then a faint click. The film reel ends. The war ended, but their echoes remain. Steel ghosts of a time when men built machines to fight for them, and learned that the real power was never in the machine at all.